Hello, welcome to Robin Hood Sports Cars' new video for the Super Spec car, or the Super Spec rolling chassis kit. We're going to go over all the points that need to be mentioned in order for you to complete your rolling chassis. And we'll refer to initially the rolling chassis in the form that you'll get it, we'll refer to the components that you get with the kit, and we'll refer to the assembly of the components onto the rolling chassis, so that you finish up with a car that is similar to this car here. Possibly you'll be able to notice on the video that this is the gold titanium coated finish on this car. Your car should be virtually identical to this car with the exception of the gold, unless you've obviously paid extra and had the gold. You'll see that it's got lots of nice touches to it. The carbon fibre luggage compartment with the opening lid, it's got the Yokohama tyres, and it's got the correct full rear wings, and lots of other really nice points. We'll go over now to the rolling chassis that's in the other workshop that we're preparing, and that is the exact form that you will get the car. Remember that throughout this video I will be mentioning health and safety. This is really important, and we've got to assume that the people that are building these cars have got a degree of common sense and have got a degree of knowledge about general workshop safety. But remember, it is important that you wear goggles when you're doing any kind of drilling or grinding. It's important if you're underneath the car that you've always got the car on axle stands. It's important that you really don't ever work alone in your workshop. There is always somebody that will come in and make sure you're okay, bring you a cup of coffee every couple of hours or so. Remember that if you've got a pit in your garage, be careful, because if you get petrol fumes in the bottom of the pit, they won't go away, and it's very easy to drop a 240 volt lead lamp into the pit and the whole lot explodes. There shouldn't be any welding for you to do on these packages, but if you do want to weld anything in particular, be very careful, because that can also start a fire. When you come to the auto electrics, remember, be careful about that, because again, you can short out quite easily and that can also start a fire. If you've got small children or pets, try to keep them out of the workshop. The tools that you need are general tools that we hope you've already got. You shouldn't need an engine lift, because we've already got the engine in position, and incidentally, if you ever do want to remove the engine and gearbox, that does come out through the bottom, so you will leave the engine and gearbox on the deck and just lift the front of the car off it. Any kind of lifting of any description, make sure that you're not straining yourself and you've got lots of people to help you with the lifting. Again, oils and brake fluids and things like that will also cause problems these days with skin problems. And remember that inside the battery there is acid, so be very careful that you don't damage the battery or you get any acid squirt out into your eyes. Make sure you've got a first aid kit on hand for any kind of minor or major incidents that you might have. With regards to the tools, we're assuming that you've got a full socket set, you've got a full set of spanners, you've got a full screwdriver set, you've got a range of hammers, vice grips, pliers. You'll probably need a file or some set of files. You'll definitely need a mini grinder. That's a really important tool these days, a little mini grinder with preferably a hard disc rather than a soft disc in it. You'll need a vise probably. But nothing, you shouldn't need to buy anything really that you haven't already got. Tools have never been so cheap and never been so good. Machine might do a good range of tools, and we can recommend them for almost professional quality tools. Remember, everything that we've fitted to this rolling chassis, we've fitted for your convenience, and none of the nuts and bolts are particularly tight. So it is important that you do check every single nut and bolt that we put on, because we have assumed that there may be a reason that you may have to take it out to do a certain operation. So don't assume that all the nuts and bolts are tight. Before the car goes on the road, make sure you check them all. You will see in lots of cases of used nylon locking nuts. So again, just make sure that any nuts that aren't nylon locking nuts, there is a Loctite on it, or if necessary a split pin. The whole of the video dwells pretty heavily on the SVA test, and remember our aim, the whole aim of this video is really to get you through that SVA test and to get your car on the road. We won't be able to dwell too heavily on the cosmetic items of the inside of the car and the very, very finer points of the cosmetic finishing. That will be up to you, but we will tell you how to get round the SVA test. For instance, we're not recommending at all that you fit the windscreen, the wipers or the washers, but they're intended to be left off. And any other cosmetic items, they also should be left off, just so that you can actually get through the test. Be very careful that you don't use anything on the car that isn't brand new. The only item you'll find on the car that is second-hand or reconditioned is the rear axle assembly. So don't be tempted to fit something that you think looks good that you've had in your garage that your granddad's given you, because that you won't get your new registration mark if there's any question that everything isn't brand new except the one component that is the rear axle. Don't fit anything like a radio or any spot lamps or anything like that. Just keep it as plain as simple as possible. We'll go through now to the main workshop, but we will return periodically to look at this car, so we can look at the finer points so you can see exactly how we've done certain operations. This is the exact form that you will get the rolling chassis in. You can see that we've done an awful lot of the more difficult jobs on the car, and really it should be quite a simple task for you to complete this super spec car. You can see that we've now got the desirable separate scuttle and bonnet, and we've got the nice arrangement of 7 blocks of 7 louvers in the bonnet to aid cooling. You can also see we've got these new type SVA correct rubber bonnet catchers that are terrific. These are brand new for this super spec car, so they make the removal and the fixing the bonnet quite easy. We've got clearance under the bonnet for all the components, so we haven't got any horrible scoops in the bonnet. You can see that we provisionally fitted the windscreen and the sealing rubber, and obviously all the suspension, the engine and gearbox, back axle, and even the seats are fastened in. But I would recommend that one of the first jobs that you do is to take the seats out of the car and put them away in the spare bedroom out the way. The same with the windscreen, that can be taken off as an assembly and put again in the spare bedroom, because you won't need that for a long time after, when you've got the car registered and through the SVA test. You'll see that the car comes complete with a plastic finish on it. This peels off easily. Try not to leave it in the sun, because it does tend to bake it on and make it more difficult to get off. But while you're working on the car, it does protect it from general scuffs. Remember that because of the nature of the material we've used, the stainless steel, that there are an awful lot of sharp edges on the car, particularly at this stage while you're building the car. I want you to be really careful. Obviously when the car is almost complete, you'll have got snap-on edging that goes on all the awkward places around the car. Stephen, pass me the snap-on edging. So we've given you, throw it across, we've given you twice as much of this material that we normally give to Robin Hood builders, and so you should have plenty. So anywhere where you need an edge to be covered over where it's sharp, for instance like on the corner of the scuttle, once you put the leather cloth on, that just snaps over that and makes it safe. And really anywhere where you need to, you can use this, either temporary or permanent, so that you don't cut yourself. As I have already stated, we've already fitted the bonnet for you and the bonnet catches. There is a degree of adjustment in these catches, in so much that the fixings for them, you can drill holes slightly higher or lower in the bodywork to give the catch less or more tension, although it is pretty forgiving with it being rubber, provided that the holes that you drill are covered up by the catch themselves. So we fitted them to the very best of our ability at this stage, and we are relying on the catches themselves to pull the bonnet down tight. So let's show you again. So we're relying on the catches to pull the bonnet down tight on the scuttle. So we've already put that snap-on plastic trim on the edge of the bonnet there, but as you can see, they are doing quite a lot of work to pull that down tight there, and also for the nose cone. So remember that they do quite a lot of work, and you may need to slightly adjust them finally. So we're going to take the bonnet off now, and as always with these Robin Hoods with detachable bonnets, it is important that at any time when you take the bonnet off, put it away safely. So lots of people lift the bonnet off the Robin Hood and show the chums how good the engine is, all shiny, and they stand it up like that, and while they're blowing the trumpet, the wind comes and blows the bonnet over and dinks it, and then we get £160 off them for a new bonnet. So don't let that happen. As soon as you take the bonnet off, lay it on the floor conventionally like that, so that it doesn't blow over. Very dangerous if you've got a dog or a small child, it could decide to jump on it. So again, be careful with the bonnet, put it away. Stephen, put that bonnet out of the way now, we don't need that anymore. We come down to the nitty gritty of the rolling chassis, and you can see, looking in there, that it really is a simple task to finish off the car. Lots of work has already been done. But having said that, there is still quite a lot still to do, so don't kid yourself too much. You have got quite a bit of work ahead of you, but lots of the difficult bits, the heavy lifting, has all been done. Now, this engine, whether it's injection or the turbo, it is hung from the engine mounting. If we could just look at a chassis, then we can show you where the engine mountings are. Right, this is a bare chassis ready to have the floor panels and the interior panels fitted to it. And you can see that the engine is nicely hung from 3 brackets. So they're the brackets, one there, one under your pedal box and one at the front. And then it's balanced nicely by the gearbox bracket just here. So this is a U-shaped bracket that comes from underneath, and there is 4 points for the engine, all rubber mounted, and that is hung quite well. Remember that when you do come, if you want to take the engine out, all that happens is that you just sit the engine on the floor, and then you just lift the rest of the car off the engine like that, lift it up, lift the car away, and lift the engine out. You can even put the engine on a child's skateboard and then just wheel it out from underneath the car. But just remember, you've got to always be really, really careful. Don't lift anything that's heavy. Remember that when you're working on your Robin Hood, either while you're building the kit or after, don't leave any tools on top of the engine and then shut the bonnet, because you'll put dings in top of the bonnet. So make sure that you're not using the top of the engine as a tool tray, and everything like these components are well out the way when you shut the bonnet down. The radiator's fitted for you when it leaves the factory. I'll go on to that later on, and the pedal box is also fitted in with all your pedals there. The pedals are fitted in, but you've still obviously got to connect them up. The servo's in, and there's a remote reservoir, which I'll show you later. All the panels on the car are only temporary fitted, and there is a minimum amount of screws holding them in. You will have to supplement all the panels with extra screws when you finish the car off. It isn't impossible that during the build you may wish to take a panel off for a particular reason. They do come off quite easily and quite simply. In the kit you will be given several tubes of sealer, and basically these tubes will be marked with the numbers from the alphabet, A and B. The ones that are marked A is a high quality sealer. It may be Q-Flex or it may be a different make, and that will be marked A. The lesser sealer will be marked B. Anywhere where you need to do any sealing that's structural, then you'll use A. If it's just filling gaps in where there's a gap in the panel work, then you'll use B. Where I'm coming from is that I feel that the way that we fix the panels using the self-tapping screws is adequate, and they shouldn't need anything more than that, because the panels aren't structural at all. They are only, they're not stress panels, they're not structural. But if you really wanted to make a super job of the car, and you wanted to give yourself a creak-free, rattle-free car, then you could bond all the panels on using this high-quality sealer. Obviously, it's always a little bit risky doing that, because if you need to remove the panel before the finish of the build, then you've got a job to get it off without damaging it. So if you feel confident that everything's going great and possibly finish the car, then you might want to bond all the stainless steel panels on with the high quality sealer. You will need, when you finish off to put the windscreen on, you will need to use this high quality sealer in the corners of the rubber, just there where there's a little bit of a gap. You will need to seal that in particular. We now come to look at the front suspension and the front corner of the car. Now you'll all agree that this suspension system is a particularly nice system. We have had the wishbones cadmium plated. We haven't had a full chance to assess how good this cadmium plating is yet. It does look good, but at this stage I think I am going to say to you that you will need to paint them with a durable paint finish. I think the cadmium plating is a good base, but I don't think it will stand up to years of salt. So I think you will have to rub them down a little bit, paint them with a bare metal primer, and then paint them with a satin or a semi-shiny paint. You'll see, possibly if you get a little bit closer camera person, you'll see that we've got the car sitting quite nicely, possibly a little bit high at the front. This is to allow for the fact by the time you finish the car, it'll settle down a little bit with the extra components you're going to put on, but in any event, by the time you've gone around the block a couple of times, the suspension will settle. So it will go down a little bit. There is adjustment on the Zima gas shock absorbers, on the locking nuts, but apart from that, there is provision on the holes in the wishbone to move the bottom fixing of the shock absorber either inwards to lift the suspension up or outwards to drop it down. So there's lots of adjustment on that. You will also see that we haven't tracked the car up, and there is adjustment on that track rod there to adjust that. This is something you've got to do. Stephen, if you pass me that bit of chrome tube, you will see that we give you a nice piece of stainless tube in the kit. As you get towards the end of your build, you'll cut that in half and you'll put it over that track rod. You'll cut it over the track rod to give you a cosmetic finish. On the cosmetic side of things again, Stephen, if you take the tube from me and pass me a headlamp bracket cover, then there's a nice as a nice way to finish off the top of that once you've bolted your headlamp on it, and so there isn't a sharp thing for the SVA test. We're giving you these covers that go over that like that the headlamp will go down and trap that in position, and it just finishes it off, makes a nice job of it. The snap-on edge that we've given you, the black snap-on edge, will go around the edge of the nose cone like that to finish that off. With regards to the cycle wing brackets, we have already put you the main cycle wing bracket on the car, and we've gone to quite a long way of improving these brackets. This is now a solid piece of rod now, so there's very little chance that that main bracket there will ever snap off. And we supplement that with a pair of tubular brackets, not sure which is which yet, but they go on there like that. That could be that one. That slides over that, like so, or it might even be the other way, like so, and it just gives you endless amount of adjustment when you come to put your cycle wings on. Obviously they push over there, you get the gap from the tyre, the correct gap there. You may just have to tweak these. I can see that if that is the bracket that they've handed me straight away for the front of that, that could be it there. Just you try them, but we're looking to get that, that's the front one there. You're looking to get it parallel with the tyre. So basically what you'll have to do is slightly tweak those when you come to fit them. Once you've got the gap there, I'd imagine it's around about 1.5 to 2 inches before you try the cycle wing on, then you'll just drill through that with an 1/8 hole or a 3/16 hole, and just put a pin in there or a small nut and bolt. So they don't need an awful lot of fixing. And remember, again, you're going to check all these components on the suspension, make sure they're all tight, don't take our word for it. We've already put the calipers on, we've put the front brake pipes on, and obviously we've put the ventilator discs on. One thing that does look really good are these brand new stub axles here. I would advise you at a very early stage to get those cleaned up and painted. It may just be a good idea to take a bit of a picture photograph of these, showing that they're brand new, just in case there's any arguing at the end of the day with the people that are going to give you the new registration. But they are obviously brand new. They cost us a lot of money, so make sure that you do paint them early, don't let them go rusty. All these holes around here, you can put snap-on edge in around these holes to finish it off. Go to the front of the car, the grille. We have just cut an access hole in the front of the grille so you can look in there to see what you're doing while you're fixing the small nuts and bolts. But basically, that is the grille that you get in the kit. It's a mild steel grille. You do need to wipe it with thinners, paint it with primer, and paint it with black paint. In the kit, we do give you an aerosol of red oxide, and an aerosol of satin black. So you're going to need this mostly to do your rollover bar. Remember that anything you're going to paint, you do need to wash it with thinners first, paint it, wash it with thinners before you paint it. To come back to the grille, that is the grille. What you need to do with the grille is get a little bit of black paint, and put a little bit of black paint on the end of those 4 legs, and then just offer that up and press it square on like that, and that'll mark on the GRP where you need to drill the 8th hole. So all that happens is those 4 legs go into the 8th hole in the fiberglass, and that is all that fixes the grill, and it just pushes it, it's a tight fit. After you've done that, you do need to go around there and carefully cut it out with a small pad saw or something like that, and cut the hole, the aperture bigger. The GRP that you've been supplied with is good quality GRP, but obviously with GRP there are limitations to it. The main problem that we have with GRP the main advantage of GRP is that it's very, very inexpensive. If you was to have an accident in your car, then the nose cone would only cost you £75 for a new nose cone. So you can have quite a decent bump in a car park, and all it would cost you was £75 for a new nose cone, exactly in the colour that you want, no problem. It would cost you £75 to get it painted. If you wanted to have it painted, it probably cost more than the price of a litre of paint these days. So we can't expect an awful lot from GRP. For what it is a terrific substance, but it does tend to move a little bit once it's been on the road for a period of time. You'll see people that have the whole car in fiberglass, it does tend to get ripply and horrible. In this case, we're only supplying a limited amount of components in GRP, so that's not a problem. And there aren't long panels that is going to show the ripples up like the sides of a Cobra or a Cobra bonnet or something like that. But anyway, what we're saying is that we can't expect a lot from it. And we get it from our suppliers as it comes out of the mould. And you do have to rectify a few little marks that's on it. Often there's imperfections in the mould. Often as it's come out of the mould, it's got slightly scratched. So you need to rectify that. And we will show you some old footage of rectification work being done on GRP. So when you get your panels, if they're not exactly 100%, then the video footage does show you how you can rectify it. On a subject of GRP still, it does fade in the sun, particularly if you've got dark blue or red. If you leave your car out in the sun, you will see it fade, fortunately quite quickly. Although we do use high quality gel coats, it does go orangey, or the blue does go grey. So try not to leave it out in the sun more than necessary. Don't make the terrible mistake, as we have seen some of our customers do, of half finishing the Robin Hood, putting it out in the backyard, covering it up with a blue tarpaulin, only half covering the car, and then you'll see you've got half the car orange, half the car red. So don't do that. It's better it fades in a natural form. In the video footage we show you of the GRP being rectified, you can use that same process to take off the dead material. So there is 2 layers of gel coat on the GRP. You can flat it down with wet and dry paper and buff it up to give it a new lease of life, probably 3 or 4 times in the life of the car. But obviously at the cost of the panels, it's quite practical to treat yourself after 2 or 3 years if your car's gone scruffy to a new set of panels. Remember, when you come to look for imperfections, don't think there's an imperfection in the middle of the nose cone. There is a big lump there that's meant to be there for the Robin Hood badge to fit onto. So you'll see, if you catch it in the right light, there's a raised area there that the badge fits onto. Just to continue on the last phase of the GRP, the GRP, as I've already stated, that we supply is good quality. However, there are certain surface imperfections in it. This is usually caused by imperfections in the mould. Also, the actual manufacturing process also creates little scratches and marks in it, and the handling, the handling and transportation also causes marks in it. Nothing major, but it does have scratches. You yourself might mark it or damage it during transit or while you're building the car. Don't worry, it's quite easy to rectify. Provided the scratch isn't too deep, then you can get this out, and I'll show you how to do it now. We take this wing here, we take a Stanley knife blade, and we put quite a bad scratch in the wing like that. Okay? So that seems quite frightening. I'm just going to show you now how you're going to get that out. Wet and dry paper, 600 grit, 800 grit and 1200 grit. So we start off with the coarsest, which is the smallest number, and we flat it down with water and usually a rubbing down block as well. So I'll just do this by hand. I may use a block, I don't know. So we flat this down and we flat the scratch out. I overlap the 600 grit paper with the 1200 grit paper, and now I'm going to go on and flat a larger area with 1200 grit. So that is where the 800 grit finished, that is where the 600 grit finished, and now we're going to flat down around there with 1200 grit paper. The 1200 grit paper is the finest paper that you can get, and what would happen if we was wanted to make a super job of it, we would flat all the GRP down all over with this 1200 grit paper. Very difficult to rub through, so don't worry about rubbing too much with that. So we get this time the rubber block, we flat that down. That's dry and you can see that it's flat. The next stage is to buff it up. Now, if it was only that little bit just there like that, then with either rubbing compound, Brasso or T-cut, then you could polish that in quite successfully. Take about 5 minutes to do, but I'll show you how to do it with the machine because it's a lot quicker, and I'm anticipating that all of you will make a super job and do the whole car. Now obviously you won't all have these polish machines, but you will have Black & Decker drills that will have those lambswool bonnets in a bit of a kit you get with it that your auntie bought you at Christmas. So you'll put that lambswool bonnet onto the Black & Decker and you polish it like that. Now you notice I've got my overalls on now because this stuff does splash everywhere. We've just got to be a bit careful because you don't want this these polishes to get onto the interior trim or say onto the hood of the car that's just there, so you've got to be a little bit careful. We've got this like that, we've got the polish machine with a foam mop head on it. It is a professional item. Right, you'd normally do that twice, then you finish off with a finer polish like T-cut, and then if you was that perfectionist then you would actually wax polish it as well. So just getting close to that cameraman and you just tell him, has that scratch gone?
Yep.
It looks pretty good, really smooth. That's equal to any kind of paint finish that you can get. Thank you. Again, we've provisionally fitted this back wing, and it is fitted with a minimum of self-tapping screws. There's nothing wrong with you taking the wings off at this stage while you're working on the car, put them away safe so you don't damage them, and put them back on again. If you wished, you could reposition them to get them to fit better. But basically, we are looking for this wing to be correct. We are looking for the gaps between the tyre and the edge of the wing to be uniform on both front and rear. Because of the way the car's positioned, we can't get the camera down so you can see that, but we are looking for those gaps to be the same. And basically you can get 2 fingers in there. Obviously it's 2 fingers at the lower point of the wing, but it is a lot greater at the between the tyre and the bottom of the wing just there. When you finally fix this wing, then I think we're going to leave it to you how you fix it. If you think you're going to be knocking the back wings off every other week on the gate post, or you're going to use the car competitively, then you may just want to put the wings on just on self-tapping screws. If you think you want to make a super job of it, then you could put small nuts and bolts, or if you really wanted to go to town, you could put those riv nuts in, which are quite clever and not that expensive. But that is something you would have to buy outside what we give you from Robin Hood. You would have to buy a riv nut machine. And in any event, you'll see that we fitted the wing on, we've got it in what we feel is the best position. You may be able to alter it a little bit, it will move backward, forward, because of the forgivingness of the flange on the back of the wing. But in any event, it's got to be flush with the body just there and flush with the body at the front. You will need to fit the tadpole bead in. So you can see we call it tadpole beading because it's shaped like a tadpole. You remember tadpoles that you collected in jars when you was children? Those were the days. All that happens, that just pushes down in between the body and the fiberglass to fit in there like that all the way around. Looks quite neat. You've got plenty there for the two back wings. Yeah, there's more than enough. In fact, we've given them too much, Stephen. We could have cut down and given them a foot shorter. So that goes in last of all. It's always a good idea to do it on a nice warm day or in a warm garage because it is more pliable. You may need to snip it with the scissors to make it a little bit more forgiving to go around the corners. Again, you can see as we're on the back of the car that there's only a limited amount of screws in the stainless steel panel to the tube. You do need to put more in. Just while the camera's just there, I'll just bring forward the luggage rack cover, or sorry, the rear luggage compartment cover that we give you in the kit. There's quite a lot of work to do to these to get them to fit nicely. You do need to trim them quite a lot, and we'll come back to these later, how we fit them. But you can see that when they've made them in the mould, there is a trim line that comes about 1 inch from the top, and then there is another inch of material that you'll trim off. But basically, depending on how well we have finished off that side of the top of the vehicle, or how well you've done in putting the rest of the screws in, then you can trim that off accordingly. When we look back again at the gold car, you can see that we've done it up to the trim line and we haven't put any snap-on edging around it. But it may be that you want to make a neater job and trim a little bit more off, or you may want to put the snap-on edging on it. So we'll look at that later. A little bit tricky to spring in. As you can see, the spring in something like that. And you won't know until you see how forgiving they're going to be on how much you've got to trim off. So remember, unlike the coloured GRP, if you damage this stuff, you can't do a lot with it. The actual gel coat is very, very thin. So whilst you can get minor scratches out, you can't rub down endlessly as you can with the coloured GRP. Again, when you come to fit it, you'll be trimming off this excess amount there, and you'll be putting snap-on trim around that hole there and around that hole there to finish it off. But we'll come back to that later on. The roll bar, we do get people that have visions of polishing this up and having it shiny. I wouldn't recommend it, with there being as much brightness on the car, to have that chromium plated or have it polished. It's really lost. It looks more effective if you paint it black, as we've told you. Wipe it down with cellulose thinners, titivate the weld up, paint it with bare metal primer, and then matte black, satin black, gloss black. It's up to you. My camera person here has pointed out a few flaws in what I've said to you already. Which is quite bright, really. Titivate the weld, what I mean is with a little mini grinder, just clean it up a little bit. Don't grind it all away, just clean it up a little bit. You may want to just run a little bit of body filler in there so it looks nice and smooth before you paint it. With regard to the rest of the weld on the chassis, and with regard to the rest of the chassis, this is the exact position. It is all the tube work on the chassis is stainless steel tube. And it does actually say on it, it does give the spec of the tube quite clearly, and there's no question about that. The only slight problem that we've got, and also we do use stainless steel wire in welding the chassis together. The problem that we've actually got is that the heat from the MIG welding process does destroy the quality of the stainless steelness, and you will find that the weld will discolour, it will go slightly rusty. It won't corrode, but it will take on the appearance of rust. So what it really means that all the weld that you see that is exposed really does want a small artist brush and some primer, some sealer, something just to stop it corroding. But you must wash it with thinners first, because we do use an anti-splatter spray when we weld the chassis to stop the splatter, the weld splatter sticking onto the metal. So you may want to treat all the welded joints. On another downside of corrosion, although it is stainless steel and it clearly states on each tube that it's stainless steel, unfortunately with the salt on the road it will take up, again it will show rusty specks on it. So it isn't infallible, it will show corrosion on it. So it's a good idea that any of the stainless tubes that are exposed to the elements, particularly underneath the car, possibly you do paint. The other thing that is important is that I feel that every tube on the chassis should be drilled for a drain hole. If we did find there was a small hole in any of the welded areas, then you could find that water would percolate into the sections that we may feel are sealed. And if water did percolate into any tube, particularly on the lower of the chassis, and then the car was exposed to severe frost, then you would be quite surprised and horrified to see the tube split open. So it's a good idea to make sure there is no closed voids in the chassis, and that each tube you've got the minimum of an 1/8 hole in it, that you poke a little bit of matchstick into it every year when you have an MOT test to make sure it's not harbouring water. Right, the camera person's a bit of a troublemaker. They've suggested more solutions to the problem of the joints in the chassis, and they have suggested that you could lacquer them. Well, that is an option, and obviously if you're to lacquer them, you may have to go over them with a small rotary wire brush first to polish them up. The lacquer that you use would have to be a high quality lacquer. Unfortunately, we are lucky that manufacturers of finishers do go to quite a lot of trouble to satisfy the needs of the yachting brigade. So you will find available to yacht owners that are quite good high quality 2-pack lacquers. So you might be able to scrounge some of that and experiment with that. But definitely the kind of lacquer that you might get an aerosol can from your motorist store isn't suitable. It hasn't got the strength needed for this type of material. You'll find that on the car that we use as a demonstrator, I do think that we've given you the same carpet, which is a sable carpet, a beige carpet, and definitely with these kits that's what we're giving people with the yellow kits, the sable carpet to complement the yellow. But what we're saying is that when you carpet the inside of the car, you may find that to paint all the tube work that's inside the car a satin black will contrast and complement the carpet, whether it's sable or whether it's black. So you may want to paint all the tubes that are visible. We clearly have done on our car we use for a demonstrator. Just to make life a little bit easier, we've fastened the number plate bracket and the number plate lamp bracket onto the rear spare wheel carrier. So that's one job less you haven't got to do. That's ready to take your number plate lamp and your number plate bracket. Also, we've fitted your filler cap on there. We've used a novel method of piping it up to the tank. The only slight problem we've got at this stage, and I've got to put my hand up and admit to it, we're not 100% certain the material we used is petrol proof. So just bear in mind that the convoluted material that goes from the neck to the tank may not be petrol proof, although we will be doing tests in the next few weeks, and if there's a problem we'll obviously let you know. Again, to make the whole of the build of this Super Spec easier, we've fitted on the exhaust system for you. This doesn't mean to say that you don't have to take it off and leave it off until towards the end of the build, but you'll see that we've got good gaps round the manifold where it comes through the body, and you can see that we've got the lander sensor in the right place, and that goes through there. And you see we've got the catalytic converter, and that's fastened on to the silencer box. It's got the twin pipe tail end on it. So there is still the exhaust clamp that goes round there, and it's the kind of thing that you could have a little bit of a problem with the SVA test if you don't turn it inwards like that. But you may need just to put something over you may need to cut off the residue of the thread that sticks out, and just make sure that there's nothing sharp there that could cause a problem. The exhaust is balanced on one mounting at the back there, so unless you do get that tight there, unless you get that fastened tight, then the exhaust could rotate and cause a slight problem. So just bear in mind that is a danger. Although we may be telling you to rotate the exhaust so it does point more towards the floor, because that would make it more sympathetic for the noise for the SVA test if those weren't coming directly out and they went downwards towards the floor. So that's just an option that may happen towards the end of the video. Remember, and this is really important now, remember that this gets really hot, and we do give you a heat protector, but unfortunately the heat protector is more for cosmetic things than to be practical, because there is the problem that as your passenger gets in the car, particularly if it's a girl and she's got her legs exposed, that she could burn herself on the exhaust. But by the time we get to that part of the car, that really is quite cool, and there isn't an awful lot of danger. And if she was to burn her leg, then she wouldn't burn it terribly badly, and she'd only do it once. The big danger is to you from this part of the exhaust that does glow red hot. We've seen Robin Hoods performing, and we've seen them at night coming out of the Essence, and this has been red hot. So you can imagine if you enthusiastically whip your bonnet up and have a look under your bonnet and that's still hot and you burn your leg on it, it will give you a nasty burn. So the law is an ass really, because although the SVA test will condemn you for the recess in that Phillips screw, and they can do if they want to. The fact there's a recess in the Phillips screw, they'll say there's a sharp corner, then they're going to fail you on that. Then they won't fail you on that. That's how stupid it is. If you take your car for the test and your tyres are bald and your ball joints and the suspension are worn, then they'll still give you a pass. So that's how stupid it is. So what we're saying to you now is, I feel this is a genuine danger to you, the builder, and to your children and to your pets and anybody that might want to admire the car after you park it and you go in to get your fish and chips. So people want to see the exhaust coming through the body, but I'm afraid it is a little bit of a health hazard. So if you feel that you want to, the camera person is doing this kind of...
We're at the end of the tape.
Oh, we're at the end of the tape, sorry. It's not that I'm stopping it. It's not that I'm
going.
Are we at the end of the tape or not?
Yeah, we are at the end of the tape.
Seriously,
so can you close off?
I've got to close off
section?
quickly. I think it's a good idea to put a cover on that. Thank you. To keep going back to the SVA test, there mustn't be any sharp corners on the car, and we've got to, by hook or by crook, either permanently or temporary, solve the problem. This is an area that's a little bit of a problem. There's definitely a sharp corner there, and there's definitely sharp corners on those nuts. So in the kit, on the kit of parts, we're giving you this drive shaft boot kit. So that is what we propose, that you slit that and you put it over that and put it on with cable ties, either temporary or permanently, and that will solve the problem of that. And the one at the bottom's not quite so serious. That you should be able to get over that, even if you just put a big lump of silicone sealer on that, or made some kind of cover so you haven't got that sharp corner, or you might get a little bit of snap-on trim on that. So if you get two of these in your kit, we've already fitted new drive shaft gaiters to the back axle, so you don't need those, but that's why you've got that. Okay? Just to do another lap of the car again, we've cut the hole there for the windscreen washer jet, and it's one of the terrific luxuries that you get with the Robin Hood Super Spec. It is a heated one, so it won't freeze up in winter. That just pushes through that hole, and it's a heated jet, so it'll never freeze. Again, looking at the scuttle, we've cut the holes there for the heaters. There's two little electric heaters that you've got to mount in here. We'll show you those later on. There's two small electric heaters that will demist the windscreen. I don't think we can expect an awful lot from them, but I think they'll get you out of trouble. Particularly if you're one of these people that want to do everything correctly for the SVA test and fit the windscreen, although we're telling you not to. We haven't put them to the test yet, but we think the sufficient heat comes out of them to satisfy the examiners. But I would still be advising you not to fit the screen for the test. Incidentally, with the kit, you do get a full lock set. So you get a full car lock set that was applicable to the car that the steering column came from, and we've already put the steering lock key into the column, but you've got all these other locks in there as well, and we're giving you them because there's keys with them, and we do feel that for the very clever people out there, they would be able to adapt the rest of that lock set to make your luggage compartment lid lockable. So we haven't managed to do that yet. That's a little bit of a task for you out there, but you've got the rest of the keys and the locks, so you can experiment with that. Towards the back of the car again. When we look at the back wing, you can see that we've very, very cleverly marked into the GRP 5 little dips where you drill to fix the rear light, and another 5 at the bottom where the reversing lamps go, or sorry, the fog lamps go. No, the reversing lamps. Can you see those little dips?
It's in the top one, not the bottom.
Well, I assure you there's some in the bottom as well. Okay, so the only slight problem is that, don't take our word for it, they're only a suggestion, that having drilled them and fixed the lights, you may need just to elongate them a little bit, because if you look at the car that's ahead of you, can you see the car with the red GRP? We've fitted those lamps on, and I'm sure that they're both tipping inwards a little bit down to the inside edge. So make sure that when you foot the lamps, before you tighten the screws up, that you just possibly make a slight adjustment and get the lamp so that they're horizontal. That's important. You see me above? At this point, I ought to remind you that in the packages that you received, there isn't any fluids in them at all. So you do need to put oil in the rear axle, in the gearbox and in the engine. And we do actually give you oil, brake fluid, rear axle oil, gearbox oil, all in the packages. We come to a little bit of a delicate area, and an area that we haven't fully explored, is the problem that these engines are fitted with a power steering pump, and we don't really know what would happen if we just left it disconnected. But just so that we can do at least a token amount of rectification to it, what we're doing, we're giving you these unions that we've had a right job sourcing. So you take out that red bung there and you'll screw in that adapter that we're giving you. That adapter screws onto there. There's a special washer already on it. So that's going to screw into there like so. And then onto it, it will screw that hose tail on. So we've tried it on and it does clear the tube work on the chassis. It is close though, and if necessary we could always put a 90-degree hose tail, but we've tried it on, that fits okay. And all we're going to do then is, as you'd imagine, we're just going to push some of that pipe on there, and on the bottom one just there like that, push that on there, and so it circulates it. The good idea is just to fill the pipe up with power steering fluid before you connect it up. But at this stage we think that's going to be the solution to that problem. On the same theme that you do get in the kit a bung for the gearbox, as in the gearbox, in the new gearbox, there is a red plastic bung in the side, so we'll give you a new bung to put in the side so when you fill it up with oil. You'll see on the top of the engine, both on the injection and the turbo engine, on the inlet manifold, there's an orifice just there. Again, we've gone to great trouble to get the correct union, that'll be in the same bag as the other unions, the correct union to connect that up in there like that. A little bit of PTFE tape on that would be a good idea. So that goes on there, and that's connected up obviously to the servo. And I can see my assistant hovering in the background with a thing that is a pretty smart thing that appears to come from the Max Power stable, and it's described as an induction kit. All it really is a bit of a fancy air filter that comes with a load of gaskets for different applications. It goes on the end of the air intake, both in the turbo and the injection engine. Stick extension that we have modified to suit this MT75 gearbox, and you will see that it moves like that way. So simply the end of that tube fits over that bolt that goes into the casing like that. That goes onto there. Can you see that gone there? That goes onto there, and just two short set screws go into the gearbox. And that's basically it. Remember that we've got the scuttle fitted with a limited amount of fixings, so the scuttle can be taken off for you to get in and get this fitted. Obviously you've got to be very careful that it doesn't, once it's in, it's very close to the tunnel sides, and it's not impossible. You might just put the device and just tweak it a little bit to the left or the right for it to clear the tunnel sides. If it comes to the depth and you find that it touches the tunnel sides or it's too close for comfort, then you can cut some small holes in the tunnel side so that those sharp corners will possibly, when the engine's under load or it's pulling hard under acceleration and it does move to the rubber mountains, it won't hit the tunnel side. So that's pretty straightforward to fit. You will need a small nut and bolt through that. Make sure it's a high tensile bolt and make sure there's a nylon locking nut in it to hold that in position. We haven't cut down the gear stick yet because obviously we're going to leave that to you, and we don't really know how long you like it. It may be those of you who've got aspirations to being very fast racing car drivers would like to see it very short. You might find that if you're like me and you're more happier with a leisurely change, you may wish an easier change and use the full extent of the stick. But in any event, we do give you that kit, that very nice car interior styling kit that comprises of a gear stick, a gear knob, and a leather gaiter and 3 pedals that you've got to put onto the pedals, the pedal covers yet, and all the bits and pieces are inside the gear knob to fasten onto the stick. So you can experiment how far you cut the stick down. And I'll just remind you that there is the bung that you've got to fit into the gearbox. It's left as a yellow plastic one, so you've got to fit that in. That'll remind you to put oil in, okay? And also, if at any time in the future you need to change the gearing in the gearbox for the speedometer, there's a pretty simple method of extracting. We've already put the gear drive for the speedometer in there, of extracting the gear drive and simply putting a different tooth sprocket in there. For instance, the sprocket we've given you is compatible with the speedometer that you get in the kit, but if you choose to fit different speedometers, then you may wish to fit a different ratio in the end of the speedo drive. Along the same lines, of reminding you of certain things, that hopefully when you get your kit, you will find that it is complete. One item we're still waiting for, unfortunately, and that will be here very soon, is the rubber mountings for the gearbox. So there is rubber mountings that fit in here, and unfortunately we haven't got any, so we've put your temporary solid ones in. So you do need to change these mountings as soon as you get them in the post and swap those mountings for the rubber ones. You'll see that the prop shaft is already fitted in the car. You do need to check all the nuts and bolts are tight, and it does need greasing. There is grease nipples on it, and you do need to grease it. Obviously, one good grease now when you build the car will last you for several years. This is the engine bay of an earlier car which we're still evaluating, but basically I'm showing it to you now so you can see the position of some of the main components. You can see that starting from the very right, we've got the coil fitted right across on the passenger side of the car. We've then got the expansion tank bottle. Then we've got the ECU, and in front of that we've got that max power style air filter just there, tucked in there nicely. It's just missing the end of the distributor cap and obviously the ECU. We've then got the reservoir, the remote reservoir bottle for the master cylinder that's obviously underneath and behind the scuttle. Basically all that will happen is that onto the bottom of that reservoir will be some of the nylon reinforced pipe, the same stuff as I showed you a few minutes ago that piped up the power steering pump. That just goes on there with Jubilee clips. It goes through a hole in the bottom of the scuttle and then up into two short pieces of copper pipe that push into the master cylinder, again with Jubilee clips. I'll go over that clearer later on, but there is a very fancy and special holder for that reservoir that comes in that form in your kit of bits that will go just there, as you can see. Obviously that must sit below the level of the bonnet and it goes in there nicely. There is a block of 3 relays that we haven't yet found a home for, but before the end of the video we'll tell you exactly where those go and in what form you fit them. There you see the vacuum pipe to the servo just there, and you can also see the clutch cable goes right round the front of the engine. As you can see, right from the clutch, it's a mechanical cable, right round past the manifold, make sure it doesn't touch the manifold, right round the front of the engine and then through the front of the pedal box and to the clutch pedal. As you know, we use a production car petrol tank that comes complete with a pump, and it does give you a modest amount of room behind the seats and underneath the rear luggage compartment cover. You do get nylon fuel pipe in the kit, and the batch we've had through now is red, and we give you sufficient of this material to go from the pump along the top of the tunnel through under the scuttle and into the engine compartment. And there is a forward and return pipe to it, and all that happens is it just pushes this 8mm nylon pipe, just pushes into the top of the pump. No fancy connections, it's just a push fit, and that seems to work quite well. Obviously you've got to sympathetically tie it down with cable ties so that it doesn't come upright like that. There's a nice gentle curve just there, and you've got to be a little bit careful that when you do carpet out this area that you don't squash that down too much and find out you've got a kink in the tube there. So you may want to cover over that to keep that as a nice flow where it goes into the top of the tank. We've just clipped that up with cable ties onto that little bit of a breather pipe just there. So you can see then that these two pipes go forward and they disappear into the engine compartment, and we'll show you then there is a inline filter we do give you in the kit how to connect that up. Lying alongside in bed with these two petrol pipes is the wiring loom and the two brake pipes. Remember that the master cylinder has got 4 orifices to it, obviously one for each wheel. So there is 2 separate pipes go to the back, and you can just see those copper 3/16 copper pipes in the top of that, on top of those tubes, along with the wiring loom. You see it just there, and there is several individual wires or sublooms go from the back of the car to the front. So all those can be probably quite untidily put on top of those 2 tubes on top of the chassis, because they can all go into that space, because there's quite a neat cover that covers that and keeps them all in there intact. So remember, it is important that you keep all your wires and all your pipe work tidy, but in the instance here, then it is in order just to lay them in top of that tunnel channel, and probably as you get towards the end of the build, you can cable tie them all together. Remember, it's really important with these wires and pipes and tubes that you don't drill through them when you're fixing components onto the car. As we look at the fuel tank again, you can see that as far as the wire is concerned, that we've got ordinary push-on connections that push into that dedicated plug. We haven't got the proper plugs, so we'll supply small spade type terminals that go in there, make sure they're insulated, and once you've found out which are the right connections to use, you'll get those in your instructions with the wiring, your wiring instructions. Then you'll be able to seal it off with silicone sealer, and that will give you like a permanent plug. But where we're coming from is that this is part of the loom that you get in the kit that comes up to those, the end to those two female spades. You'll have to make those two separate wires that come from the main loom, and then there looks as if there's a third one. It's a separate one that will go forward. We will explain where all those go. I can see that the wiring loom, as it comes along the top of the tunnel there, it disappears through that hole and then goes under the tank, and it re-emerges from underneath the tank, and then it looks like it comes up forward and through there to feed the sender, and then there's two more arms that go out, two more that go out to both the two side lights. Again, we'll give you all the colours for those that you can join them up. You'll notice we've put a little self-tapping screw in that flap just there to secure that. You can see that now we have the seats out of this car, that there are several holes already in the floor, and you can see the four main holes, the generously cut inch diameter holes. They're the holes that the seat, the four fixings for the seat go through. Obviously you'll see that they've been fitted using quite large washers, but the seats come out quite easily. You can see also that there is two more holes around the seat hole, and they are to hold on this bracket here. You'll see this it's quite a substantial bracket made from 3mm material, and it's pre-bent like that. Those two holes that you see there pick up the handbrake. So they pick up the handbrake cable, and then that is bolted underneath the car, and you'll see that the large diameter hole picks up the seat goes through, and then the other two match up with the two other holes that's in there and make that quite a substantial part of the car, because it's through these holes that your inner seat belt mountings will fix. So the SVA test examiners are quite keen on the fact that everything is substantial. So we have made all the fixings pretty strong for the seat belts. So with that plate underneath there, with it being supplemented with two thicknesses of floor and one thickness of tunnel side and that bracket, then we're sure that it will excel the requirements of the SVA test. So these are the ones that fit the two top mountings. That one just there and through the floor is for the inner fixing of the seat belt, and then for the outer fixing, I think if we can just look on a real chassis, one that's here, so we can see that that's the main fixing that the rear axle fastens onto, and that hole there is the fixing for the the outer seat belt fixing, and you can see that that's substantially welded onto the chassis, and then it's made from 5mm thick plate. So any questions at all by the SBA examiner about that, then you can assure him that everything is quite substantial, and all the bolts are up to the required standard, and they're all supplied with nylon locking. You can see just around this area here, there is a bit of a gap where the subframe comes through this panel, and we've just pop riveted a small plate on there, a little one underneath there, one at the side, and we'll just seal that up with silicone sealant. Just to go over some of the components that you get in the kit, we give you a nice set of air horns. They're complete with a tube and a relay, nuts and bolts, and then you've got an interior mirror that's an adhesive one. Remember to warm the screen up before you stick it on, and I like to fit these mirrors a little bit to left of centre, so sit in the car and decide where you're going to fit it, top of the screen obviously, and then okay, the flippy camera person keeps chucking in problems. We've told you not to fit the screen, but you do need 3 mirrors for the SBA test. So all you can really do is to mount that on top of the scuttle, just there like that, on a temporary bracket. Don't get the stickiness don't lose the stickiness of the self-adhesive pad. It'd be better to drill 2 small holes on it and mount it temporarily there. You will need that to pass the SBA test, besides the other 2 mirrors that we give you in the kit. So the mirrors are in here, spring-back mirrors, they're in that box, as is the headlamps, the side lamps, twin reversing lamps, SBA fog lamp, number plate lamp, etc, etc, etc. It's all there. Oh, and side light adapters. So you get these cost an arm and a leg, these do. We don't normally give them to people. In the normal Robin Hood kits, we make them buy them extra. But for you, you get these are special. We'll remind us to give them bulbs. Stephen, there's no bulbs with these. So they get these that's got a side light in it. So throw away the ones you get in the headlamps, chuck those away and put these expensive ones in your headlamps instead.
Motorcycle flashlights underneath.
Cycle flasher lamps?
Yeah.
They're in there?
Yeah.
All right.
Box underneath.
All right. Well, you know, they'll find them anyway and can go over there. So we've got that. And remember what bulbs were these, Stephen? I think we must be losing £1 million on each kit yourself. I think that's these lads to take a drop in wages, Stephen, that's all. Right, you come more square on. Just to go over again, red oxide primer, satin black paint, the different grades of A and B silicone just there. We come to a delicate matter now, glue. Glue. It's always difficult to get glue that's any good, that sticks. Possibly the very best glue you could get could be Evo stick. But we don't have it here. We've got trouble with some of the lads sniffing it. So you might find that Evo Stick's the very best glue to use. But basically, we give you an aerosol of this glue that, to be quite honest with you, isn't very clever. But it's very easy to use. But it does come unstuck under very hot conditions. So if you've got it in the cockpit round about where the heater's blowing, or you've got it, you're using it on a very, very warm day, it does tend to fail. So don't dwell on that, don't put a big emphasis on that glue, but it is easy to use. So we've just got this new glue that's just coming in, so we're giving you 4 tins of this. So I think we might find this is a lot better. So give that a try. You've got 4 tins, see what that's like. These are the stone guards for the rear wings, left and right, and we'll show you some old footage, a video to show you how to fit those. They're made slightly oversized, so if you need to trim them a little bit, you can just snip a bit off with some metal cutting shears or a fine-tooth jigsaw. That complements the piece of channel that's used for the tunnel top, so that goes round the that goes over the gear stick hole. You do need to put a 90-degree bend on that. We can show you on a completed car. You do need a 90-degree bend on that, and you do need to turn all these fingers upwards to put a little hook on them. Again, we'll show you that later on, for it to grip the bottom of the elasticated gear stick gaiter. While the nose cone is off this rolling chassis, I'll just go over the main plumbing to the engine. This consists of 4 rubber pipes and 2 steel pipes, and all the hoses are hoses that we've used that have been cut up from another application, but if you should ever need to replace the hoses, there are numbers on them. To make it simpler, we've marked the 4 ports from the engine and gearbox: 1, 2, 3, which is underneath the alternator, and 4 is the top one out of the cylinder head. And we've marked the corresponding places on the hoses. So as we lift this off, you can see that we've got AA, BB, number 1 and number 4. So when you get these in your kit, we'll have pushed these on for you to make it a bit simpler, but if you do take them off, suppose you want to send that tube away to be chromium plated or something, then obviously you won't forget how it goes. So make sure they're pushed well on, and then we'll give you the correct size Jubilee clip. So that's pretty straightforward. This tube here is bent slightly to accept that. Again, we'll push those hoses on so you can see exactly where they go in the future. Just while I'm working on this car, I see that they've left these metal cutting shears on the tyre. They've been just trimming some panels. If you decide to push the boat out and treat yourself to some new metal cutting shears, then we can recommend these Gilbos. They're made by Record Tools, and you can get them from all good tool merchants. They're the only ones really that will cut stainless easily, and they are left and right handed for getting into awkward places. So you can see they do cut it quite easily, particularly when they're new. So they're quite expensive, about £25, but they're definitely worth buying. This is another type of cutter that we don't use very often, but very occasionally we need to get in an awkward place, and this is what's called a Niblex cutter, I think. They're made by several people, and this material, 0.7 stainless, is about its maximum, and it works on a principle that it takes that piece out, and it does claim to cut it without distorting the metal. But again, it's got limited uses. And imagine after you've used these for 4 or 5 metres that the blade would go a little bit blunt. But if you needed to trim anything, then you could use these. Having covered the correct installation for the radiator plumbing, we now come to a union that comes off the top of the tank and goes across towards the expansion tank bottle. That is a position of the bottle with a filler cap, so it's underneath the level of the bonnet. we'll move over to another car now that hasn't got all that on it. And we will give you some of that stainless steel tube together with an assortment of pre-shaped production car hoses that you'll be able to find the correct bends to plumb up this metal tube that comes off the engine just there, and that other metal tube that comes from the top of that thermostat housing to fix onto the various outlets on the expansion tank bottle. So you've got plenty of material there to go at. The overflow out of the top obviously just goes and overflows away. The bottom fixing on the expansion tank comes out of the bottom along there, along the top of the body. We'll give you a little bit of aluminium tube for just there, and then that goes into the top of that header tank just there. The top side fixing goes from the top around there and then onto that metal pipe that comes from what we've called the thermostat housing, and then the main one, the main tube there, goes along into the bottom of the expansion tank bottle, and it looks like they've put a little hole in the tray, this tray just here, to allow the bottom feed outlet from the tank to go back on itself and back up again to the metal pipe from the engine. Just remember, any of these pipes that do encroach into the passenger compartment of the cockpit, then you must be very, very careful to make sure you tighten up all the Jubilee clips. I'd also like to see the Jubilee clips on the hoses wired, because nothing is more frightening than for a hose, a heater hose or a radiator hose, to come off into the compartment of the car while you're driving along and scold everybody and fill the car full of steam. So just make sure that all these tubes, pipes, are all connected on quite securely. Again, the camera person just pointed out to me that it may be better for us to give you a length of reinforced nylon pipe for this section here, so you won't get that rubber and metal pipe in the pit. You will get some more reinforced nylon pipe to put on there, but you can either tuck it underneath or clip it onto the top like that out of the way. What you see now is the scuttle removed from the car, and it is actually upside down. Inside it you can see that we've got the instrument cluster with the wires coming from it. Unfortunately all the wires are red, don't worry about that at this stage. And inside there that you can't see yet is the wiper mechanism. I'm going to lift the wiper mechanism out because this is the exact form that you will get it in. Again, it's a production car wiper mechanism that we've modified and shortened so that it will fit in our scuttle. And you can see that it is very close to the speedometer cluster, but having said that, it will still go in and out. So we lift it out now, and we can see it's quite a neat affair, and we've put all the little magic brackets on to make it easy for you to fit. So I hope that you can see it clearly, and as I said to you, this is the exact form that you will get it in. You can see that there is a plug in the back, a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pin plug in the back there that you will connect onto. So as you know, the holes are already in your scuttle for your wiper spindles like that, and this will go in quite simply. Obviously when you're doing this kind of exercise you have got to be careful that you don't dent the scuttle. This is held in position by 3 brackets 1, 2, 3, all of which you've got to drill and put small neat nuts and bolts in. So we're going to put this back in now, like so. Pop the spindles through like that, and that sits in. So what will actually happen now is that there isn't a problem at all. You can drill through this firewall panel from the engine side and put a 6mm nut and bolt on there with a couple of washers. Can't go wrong with that, no problem at all if you drill a hole in the wrong place and not the end of the world. But the ones on top you do have to be really careful with and drill those correctly. So I suggest what happens is that you take note where the plates are underneath the scuttle. I'll lift it out once more and you'll see that with them being quite large, then it does give you a little bit of leeway. So when you drill through the top, anywhere at all on that plate, there, but preferably in the middle like that, that's what you're looking to pick up. So we pop that back in, pop the spindles through the holes, and then from the top we're looking to drill through neatly and put nuts and bolts through the wiper mechanism. And that's really it. Pretty straightforward, nothing dramatic. That's how that works. While we're here, you'll see that they've attempted to put the leather cloth on the dashboard, and you'll see how all the little tags have to be cut and bent over. So it's pretty basic trimming stuff this, but you do need to cut all the leather cloth like that so that all around the holes you can cut it and bend it over and then glue it from behind. Stone guard now for the back wing. And these stone guards are quite important because I feel it gives the Robin Hood car that original look, and also it can help you a tremendous amount if you've made any mistakes around this area, and it does finish it off nicely. Remember, we've got this bottom of the wing still to be trimmed. We've decided that line's right. We've got screws in there. You could substitute pop rivets for those 2 screws now. But whatever you do, don't let the whole thing spring apart. So what happens now is you get the original stone guard like that, put it on a piece of cardboard, and you draw around it like so. And then you cut that out with a pair of scissors. And that gives you a dummy stone guard. So we then offer that up like that, and see we've got a monster amount of material too much, and it wants to finish up something like that. So we just mark that roughly like that, and we trim that. The cameraman tells me we've already done this earlier on in the video. We'll do it again. So we trim that like that, and we offer that up, and we can see that that isn't very good. So we can see that it really should be, it wants to come to the bottom of the wing, the bottom of the body there, sorry, and it wants to finish up where the red wing is. So we can see we need to trim that corner off like that, and we need to add some on just there, okay, where we've made a mistake. So we can trim that now like that. and we'll put that bit back on there again. So we've trimmed that bottom corner off, we've stuck a bit on there like that, and we've offered that up again. You can see we just need to trim a little bit off that corner just there like that. And we're tucking this bit of paper in behind the plastic beading that's already there. Picture a tiger on the back, a tiger, right? Okay, so that goes in there like that. That's looking pretty good. And we're looking for a couple of things, or a few things. One, we get the top of that straight, level, horizontal. We're looking to not have too much covering the red because we can't get it to bend around the corner. We're looking for it to meet that corner just there and pick up the red just there. So we're just going to take a little bit more off that edge there. I thought Tiger did really well to get that national coverage for their twin motorbike engine car. Well done, Jim. So we've trimmed a little bit off that, like that, and that goes in there like that, and that's looking pretty good now. So we can see we've just got to make sure it comes a little bit higher to cover that self-tapping screw. We may just have had that self-tapping screw there a little bit too high. So we've just got to watch that. So that's got to cover that. So we're going to, now that's the template we've got, we're going to put that on our master just there, on the original one, and we can see that we've got plenty of material left there to cut, and we're going to very carefully now go around that, mark it on the plastic, round there, mark it on the plastic all the way around like that. So that, you can see the piece we're looking to finish up with, and we're now going to trim that with the gilboes, deburr the edges and try it in position. We've now drawn around the paper template, we've cut the stone guard out, we've deburred the edges, we've put some masking tape around it, we've carefully spaced the pot rivet holes about 3/8 of an inch from the edge, only along 3 sides, and we've come to offer this up now. Remember that point will go down to the body just there. We tuck it in, push it underneath the black plastic beading, and you can see it's now covered that screw there. We will substitute that screw for a pot rivet so it sits flatter, and then we'll mark along the bottom, along here with a felt tip pen, along that surplus of the rear wing that's left like that. We mark along there. We'll trim this off now with a pair of shears. Trim away that surplus material. Right, so remember, if you hadn't got that gap very good before, by putting the stone guard there, it covers a multitude of sins. If you've got lots of holes there that you made mistakes with, that covers it. And then we'll then go on, just slightly bend the stone guard like that, give it a little bit of shape, and rough up the back, deburr the back, and then we'll glue on the back that tadpole beading, the grey tadpole beading that you got in the kit. We'll glue that on the back like that, and fasten it securely with masking tape so it doesn't come undone. And we'll put that there, push it up, and then we'll drill, pot rivet it all the way around to finish it off and make it look neat. We'll do the same exercise on the other side, but remember there's a slight difference in the 2 wings, so you may find that the template for the other side is slightly different. The other wing is shorter so that the exhaust will go and will go past the wing, and in theory it dissipates the noise around the tyre. We come now to probably the most important part of building the Super Spec car, and that is wiring it up. As I've already said to you, you do get a base loom, and then that's supplemented with several other looms, sub-looms, the other main loom being the one that's actually on the engine, the one that's got the big multi-plug on for the ECU. But most of the work does revolve around this Robin Hood base loom. And that is it on the floor, that is the form that you will get it. And to be quite honest, if you said you was frightened, I wouldn't really blame you for being frightened. But when we move on a little bit, you can see that we've attached it to a framework that outlines the shape of the car, and that will now start to make the loom look a little bit easier. You can see that we've also put lamps on the back, so you can see the back and the front, and you can see that all the wires are all identifiable by the colours, and all the colours are in fact British standard colours. So if you've already got a little bit of knowledge about car wiring, then you're really 3/4 of the way there. But we're going to talk to you in the manner that we're assuming that you haven't got any knowledge and that you are a beginner. And as long as you keep an open mind and try not to get frightened by it, then you can't go far wrong. So basically, to supplement this video, we will give you some written instructions, and the written instructions really revolves around which colour wires to connect up to which coloured wires on the component. And we start off at the back of the car, and you can see by the rear lamps there's little clusters of lights that's coming out. Now, Walter is an expert on these wiring looms, and he is going to show you now which wires you connect up, and in particular which type of connector you use. So with the loom we're giving you two main types of connectors. These are bullet connectors, they look like bullets, and there is double bullets and single bullets. So obviously in the written instruction that we give you, we will tell you which is single bullets and which is double bullets. So at this stage, Walter, if you just passed me a single and a double bullet, then I can just show the viewers exactly what we mean. So here we have the two types of connections that's used predominantly on the base loom, and that's a double bullet and that's a single bullet. And we can see the colours.
You don't have to hold them there.
I'm sorry. A single and a double bullet. Okay? You can see the wires that come out of the loom like that, and you can also see the wires that come out of our lights. And you can see that there's a couple of red wires there and there's one red wire there. So would I be right in saying, Walter, that the two red wires you put a double bullet on like that?
Yeah.
And then it's common sense that the one red wire that comes from the light, you put a single bullet in like that. You push them in so that they're right in solid, and that's it. Having said that, it's a good idea not to push them all in solid to start with, but just to put them in loose like that. So you can obviously probably take the lamp off and alter it as you go along. And on this side of the car, which is the driver's side, there is only one wire coming out. So we'll just put a single bullet on there and connect that up to the single red wire just there. Dead simple. But we will give you the written instruction where all the colours go. That's pretty straightforward. And don't forget, Walter, anything I've said wrong, don't be frightened to interrupt me, because we don't want 1,000 people wiring the cars up wrong. What I would say is that one of the key things that go wrong with kit cars when you wire them is people don't put grommets through the metal bodywork, and therefore the wire chafes on the metal and it shorts through to earth, and that's what starts to cause the problem. So that's one of the main problems. The other main problem is that they don't earth the loom to the car. So remember that on our wiring loom, black is earth. So you'll see in certain places on the loom just find one, Walter. There's a ring terminal on it. So there we are. You can see there's a ring terminal there. So what you need to do is to, obviously it's not a painted chassis ours, it's bare metal. You need to drill a hole and put a self-tapping screw into the chassis, and that earths it. So really anywhere on the car where there's a black wire, it either wants connecting to another black wire or connecting to the earth of the car. Just remember that in this case black's earth. Don't get confused when you're doing when you're wiring your wife's new electric iron up, or you're plugging in the fish tank, that domestically brown's earth, but in this case black is earth. So that's pretty straightforward, the bullet connections, and the bullet connections are used extensively at the rear of the car on the rear lights and at the front of the car on the front lights. So we'll give you adequate numbers of connections when you do that. We move down the loom, and we've already talked about the Ready's live, so that goes straight to the side light. In the loom, Walter, is there any provision in our loom, is there any provision for the fog light in it?
There is, yeah, there's a fog light.
Okay, there's a fog light
There's
wire.
your blue and yellow there, and then obviously you've got to earth it on a double
Yeah.
to there, and
Yeah.
then like that, them earths will feed
Yeah,
all them as
okay,
well,
so that's
you get in
straightforward.
return.
The two, you put a bullet on the two earths, and the two blacks straight to earth, and then, as we've told you, and will tell you, that the blue and yellow is the fog lamp. Now, that will in turn go to a switch that will provide, that will be an illuminated switch on the dashboard that will light up when you've got your fog lamp on. And when we refer to colours, we're referring, when we say it's blue and yellow, the first colour that we mention is the predominant colour in the wire. So the wire looks like it's blue, but when you look closely, there's a very fine, what's known as a tracer wire, and that's yellow. Obviously, if you've got enough eyesight like me, when you're getting on a bit, then that yellow looks a bit like a white. So if you look closely, it is a yellow. I can also see there's a green and purple, etc. The green and purple, what's that?
Brake.
That's the brake light. So we'll tell you all those. So as we move down the loom, what we would say is, you can see for simplicity, we've cable tied the loom to this frame, and the same thing happens with your car, that you've got to fasten it up somehow. We'll give you a lot of cable tie, so you can cable tie it where you like, or you can put a blob of silicone sealer, or you can really go mad buy some little fancy clips that's available. So we come down to the handbrake. There's wires for the handbrake, pretty straightforward. And then as we come further down the car, we're coming to a big cluster of wires that start to get us frightened again. But with the success of the rear end, then you've got the confidence to carry on with here. Remember, as I said earlier on in the video, that's the main wire that goes to the back of the car. That just sits on top of the two tubes on the tunnel. We come to this conglomeration of wires now, and you'll see there's a bunch of wires there, and they've all got the ends nicely, what's the word I'm looking for, Walter? When you're in bared, yeah, bared, that's it. The wires have been bared, and in this case we do give you a multi-block connection. Stephen, could you get a multi-block connection so we can show? So this lot, all this lot goes to the instrument cluster, and all the colours are there, and it's dead simple. We'll tell you which colour wire goes to which colour wire on the instrument cluster, and they're all joined with a multi-plug connection. So that's pretty straightforward and pretty easy. You can see there's a nice little fuse box there. If you can mount that somewhere on the car that you can get to relatively easily to change one of the 4 fuses if necessary. There is 4 fuses there, but throughout the car, the Super Spec, we are giving you other inline fuses. Walter, could you get one of those inline fuses? So we give you a couple of these. You've seen these before, these connecting strips. You can either use them as a strip, or you can break the bits off and use each one individually. So they'll go along there, and that'll make it quite simple. A little terminal driver to tighten those up. That is self-explanatory. We come to some connections here that have already been pre-wired up with a couple of quite fancy, one's a male, one's a female connector on them. In the packet that you do get, could you pass me them, Walter? The other half of that connector. So you get the other half of that connector, and they're in a bag like that, and also with the plastic connector you get all the spades. So you have to put the little spades inside, you have to crimp them on and then slide the plastic cover over. I won't dwell on that because you will be able to work out how that happens yourself. And that is done so that if you want to disconnect the components that go on the end of here, you can simply just unplug the connector, and it makes it quite convenient. Now, I haven't yet told you where these two go, and I'm pretty certain that these two go to the column switches. These go to the column switches, and we will again give you directions, indications, guidance where all the separate colours go to match them up. So that again is pretty straightforward, and that will connect up the column switches to those two just here. So we can see we've got other wires that hopefully Walter will tell us what they are. There's two purples together. What do they do, Walter? That's the horn, which will cover again. That needs separate coverage. There's another fancy clip just there. What does that do?
That's
a
part of
three.
the stalks, yeah, that's part of his.
That's part of the stalks, and in this bag there's the other half for it, is there?
Yeah.
Okay, again, that goes to the stalks, the column switches, and then we've got several on their own. What they all do, Walter?
The white is the live ignition field.
Okay, the lights are, that's right. So you also in the kit, you get an ignition switch. I wonder if you know where they are, Stephen. They didn't come yesterday. We've had them for several weeks now.
You gave me yesterday.
I don't think I gave you them. Where would you find the ignition switch, Walter? They're on a trolley. I'll find that later on. Don't worry about that. So there is an ignition switch that does go into the metal housing of the steering column. So that's what when you turn your key, then the key turns the switch on the other end. So does that just plug into that switch then?
No.
No. All right. So you do need to cut that off then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you have to cut that fancy connection off and connect those wires up direct into the switch. But we will cover that again as soon as we found the switch. Now, that's really covered quite a few wires just there. We come to some more again. That's bound. Those three there, Walter. Can you?
It's a flasher unit.
Okay.
Flasher unit.
So there is 3 prongs on your flasher unit. All that happens is, again, we'll tell you. Do you know which they are? No.
Not off by hand.
Okay. We'll tell you which of the 3 colours go to the 3 prongs on the flasher unit. Again, that's convenient. That's quite long. You can fasten that flasher unit anywhere you like, underneath the scuttle, possibly somewhere that's convenient to change if you need to change it or check it. I like to have the flash unit as close as I can to my ear, so I can hear it flash in when I'm going around the corner. So that's for the flash unit, and then we've got another canch of wires there. They've got funny little spades on the end, and they're for the fog lights, but again the switch is different, so we'll cut these spades off. So cut these spades off, don't worry about those, and connect those straight up to the fog light. Fog lamp switch.
Yeah.
So we'll give you different connections to go on the end. We'll give you again spade connections, insulator spade connections, so you'll change those connections on that. That's good. Now we're moving down. We've got some more wires here. This big sheathed.
That's your wiper motor.
That's the wiper motor. That's good. Again, that's got little spades on the end. So they will snap straight into.
You may have to put different spades on them.
Okay, yeah. So these have got spades on the end, but they're not insulated spades. So you can either take the insulation off the spades that we give you, or you can take them off and put them on again. And the only thing that worries me a little bit, Walter, I've already told the people that there's 4 terminals on the back of the wiper motor. How come we've got 5? Do you know? Oh, there's 5. It's telling me there's 5. That's good. I can't count. Right, there's 5, that's good. So that's another problem solved. Now we've got another terminal there that looks like the kind of thing that plugs on the back of a headlamp unit.
switch.
Heater switch. Ah, right. There's no heater in your car. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There is a heater. There is a heater, but you won't be using that heater switch, will they?
No, but that's like insulated anyway, so
Okay.
it's not going to touch anything.
That's not going to touch anything. I'm sure there's clever people amongst you that the two little mini heaters that we give you, that you may be able to wire them up to this, but I'm not promising that. That's something. Those two heaters we're going to give you will be wired up individually and separately. So, again, all this you will need a little bit more instruction on the colours, which we will give you. I wonder why we've got those wires, those...
That's the ignition switch.
That's to the ignition switch.
Yes, that's
Okay.
the ignition switch.
That goes to the ignition switch, so separate wires there. But again, that'll be drawn. And then there's a bunch of wires here, that they probably go to the reservoir.
They do, yeah.
Okay, so again, there's two wires here that go to the reservoir, dead straightforward. We're working our way down the car, and we've got a big fat earth there. Ah, Walter, how come we've got brown? It isn't an earth,
That's
is
live.
it? That's live, oh dear. So this goes to the live side of your battery, does it? Direct?
It's, if you put it to your starter motor,
Yeah.
and then that'll pick up off your live from the
Okay.
battery, because you've got to have them for to your starter
All
motor.
right, again, we've got two thick wires and one thin wire on a ring connection. You think they can see these all right on the screen, Gina?
Yeah.
Good, a ring connection, so that goes straight to your starter motor. And then we've got a couple of,
Should wash it.
that's for the washer bottle, is it? Pretty straightforward. Next to it, 3 greens, well, 2 greens and the green, a peppermint green with a black tracer there to the washer bottle. That's really, really good. We're really moving on this now. Cancher wires at the front here, big canch of earth wires. We've told you what to do with those. Those want earthing. A purple and a black tracer and a black horn. Okay, you've got in the kit, you've got a nice packet of air horns with relays. There is instructions with those, so that's the feed to your horn anyway. That's pretty straightforward.
That's another one there to your horn as well.
Another one to your horn there.
To your horn.
Right, not quite sure why there's all these wires for the horn, but no doubt the instructions will tell us. And then again, we've got canches of wires here that go to your headlamps, your flasher lamps, and to the side lights on the near side of the car, and then more wires on the off side of the car. So that then covers very basically the wiring loom. I suggest that you lay it out on your dining room floor, the same as I've done here, and identify it. Probably put little tags on so you know where they go when you come to put it in the car. I'm not going to dwell heavily on where you put the loom. There's lots of places you can fasten it up. The main thing is that it does go not underneath the car but on top of the tunnel, and then anywhere that's neat, cable tie it up. Remember, for your SVA test, they don't want to see wires that are flapping. Those that they can't see, providing they're out the way, aren't a problem. At this stage now, we need to show you the relays that you get. So could you get the 3 relays? They're the 3 relays. Okay.
It's a switch.
Now that's a switch. Pass me that switch anyway. That's good. That's a start. Can you get the relays then, Walter? You need, in the build of this car, you do need switches to switch on several things. You need switches for the rear fog lamp. You need switches for the wipe. So the wipers are on the column. So the switches that aren't covered are the rear fog lamp, what switches aren't covered, Walter? On the column switches.
Rear fog, heater and your hazards, isn't it?
Yeah, the rear fog, the heater and the hazards. We've given you a block of 3 switches here that have got some little pictures on that will cover those 3 areas. Now basically they go into a square hole, and we could have cut the square hole in the dashboard for you, but we haven't done that simply because it may be that you might want to choose nicer switches than these. So if you think they're okay, cut the hole in the dashboard to the size that's indicated, put them there, and they accept ordinary spade terminals on the back. But you may wish to fit some different type of switches, or better still, you may wish to put this slightly out of the way. You've got to see the switch that lights up. These do light up, don't they? That's the attraction of them. They do light up when you switch on, so you've got to see them obviously, but you might not want them that prominent. So that's the three switches. We now come to the relays. Are these the relays, Walter?
Flash relay.
No,
That you get.
no, I don't think these are them. We've got some little brackets on.
Yeah, that's
They're the ones with the brackets.
There's the
Okay.
bank for the engine.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So that is a flasher relay, and it is a Ford part, got 3 prongs on the end, and I'll bet, we could plug it in there now, and we could forget that, couldn't we?
No, that's not going energy.
Right, sorry,
No.
no, that's not as easy as what I thought then. Yeah, okay, so there's 3 wires there. There's the peppermint green and red, there's the black, and there's the blue with the green tracer. So we'll tell you where they go, but obviously that just clicks in there like that, and then you need to put that out the way, and that's a flasher out the way. Now, you've given me these little relays with the 4 prongs on, but I need the little fixing bracket that comes with them. So these are something that we've had, just to be truthful, yesterday, and they're a vast improvement on what you've already seen on the car, because on the ones on the car all we've done is tape them together with insulation tape and left them hanging. So with these they're quite clever, because one side of them has a little magic provision to put that fixing bracket in. So that just goes on there like that, and then that screws onto the firewall of the car. So we start off by screwing that onto the firewall of the car, wiring the relay up, and then just pushing that over the top like so. And it makes a really neat job of fixing them. So they can all be in a row. I suggest you don't get them all close together. You space them out 1/2 inch, and each one does a different job. You can write on the top what they are, so if you ever want to swap them, they're all the same spec, so you can swap them around to see if you've got one wrong. But obviously there's 4 wires to it, and we'll again give you extensive instructions to which wire of the 4 terminals they go to. So that will supplement the wiring loom, thank you Walter, from the donor vehicle.
Inline fuse?
Inline fuses, good. Right, again, we've really moved on with these, because we did think the inline fuses, all we do is give you a fuse and you just put a spade terminal on the end. But no, we've got these really clever inline fuse holders. To be quite honest with you, if I'd seen these, if nobody told me what they were, I wouldn't know what they are. But there's your fuses, your standard fuses, automotive fuses. That just pushes into there like that. We'll give you fuses as well. That pushes into that, that's a spade terminal on each end. Just push the spade in there, and that's your inline fuse. And obviously that can just dangle anywhere, or you can fix it to the side of the vehicle, and that's great. You can put that where you see. So anywhere in the car where we recommend, or you think you need them, is put an inline fuse. We'll give you several in the package that supplements the 4 that you've already got. That's good. Any other bits of magic tricks that's lying around there we can show people before we move to a car with a loom in it?
There's only just good connections and things like that.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's like...
Just remember at this stage, I haven't mentioned this at all yet, but we do run a technical line, and there is always somebody on that. It'll be probably Walter you'll get on the technical line, or it might be Stephen, or it could be me, but particularly these people, you people there that's building this super spec car, any problems just ring us and we'll talk you through it. We really need feedback from you, so as I always tell people, we may not sound really pleased to hear from you, but we do want to hear from you, and we're here to help you. When you come to the wiring loom, that is a really difficult area, So before you get on the phone, have a really good think about it, do what you can, and then sit down with a piece of paper and pencil, write your questions down, phone me up, we'll try to go through it and get it sorted for you. Okay, you can see now that all the engines come with the engine loom already on it. You can see that that is the big monster plug there. There's about 100 connections in there that plug into the ECU. Now obviously go easy with these ECUs, don't drop them, don't take them apart, don't put them in water. And next to it is a diagnostic plug that when you go to the Rover garage and do any work on the engine, then they plug their diagnostic machine into there. That doesn't concern us. So straightforward, very easy. Plug that into there. That mounts on the. Does it mount that way up, Walter? Yeah. That mounts onto the firewall. And then we've got a number of wires here on multi-plugs. Snip those off as close as you can to the plugs and dispense of the plugs. You don't need those. These go in two directions. Some go to the relays that we've talked about a few minutes ago, and some go under the dashboard, and some go onto the scuttle, under the scuttle, and onto the instruments, and some, quite frankly, aren't used at all. They just want taping off or plugging off and leaving. Walter will now show you where the other wires go. So we've got some other wires. Walter's an expert at this. Remind me to give you Walter's home phone number before the end of the video, so you can ring him up on a Sunday and at tea time. So Walter knows where all they go. Just pay attention now. Right, Walter, off you go.
That one there is an erg.
Don't mumble because of the grinding in the background.
And then to there, just simply go for the starter motor. That one's your solenoid, turn the engine over. That one's your live. And that's it.
Have you got any colours on them?
The one with the ring terminal is a brown, and the one with the spade is, it's sheathed anyway.
Yeah,
Right.
brown as well.
Brown as well. But obviously on the starter motor there is only two connections, one stud connection and one big fat spade connection. So that's pretty straightforward. Obviously the rest of the alternator is wired up, the sensor there is already wired up. What about that, Walter? Nice little plug there.
That is the lander sensor for the exhaust.
This is the lander sensor for the exhaust. So is it true to say we cut that plug off?
Put that plug off,
We
yeah.
cut that plug off, and the other end of that wire that's inside there, we've given you special connections that go on there. For some reason, you do need the special connections.
Just to extend the wires.
Okay, so cut that plug off, and then there's 3 wires there, there's 4 wires there, is there? There's 4, okay. We'll tell you which colours to put to colours, and we give you, do you want to bring those little rolls of wire through, Steve? We'll show what we're going to give them. So in this kit we do give you lots of gear. You can see you've got lots of aerosols, tins of glue, packets of brake fluid. We're also giving you some real nice little rolls of wire that hopefully there'll be more than what you need. So when you come to build your next car or you wire up your son's motorbike, then you'll have lots of wire left. We've just had a discussion about how many rolls of this wire we're going to give you. So I'm horrified that they've agreed that you need 8 of these. So we've got enough to give them 2 each, have we, Stephen? Anyway, you'll get 8 of these rolls of wire, and that should be ample. You could make a nice little dispenser for them, couldn't you? Put them on a row and just pull them off. So yeah, look really good on your garage wall. There's a hole there, that's it. Look, the dispenser through the middle, real proper like a real auto electrician. Just before we move on to wiring up of the instrument cluster and a little bit more of the wiring, while we're in this workshop, I'm just going to go over the suspension again briefly. Basically, you can see that we now have the camera on the rear wheel and the rear wing, and without any doubt, it may look a little bit high. This is how we're going to present the car to you. And basically we think from our experience that having set off at this height, then by the time we finish the car off, fill it full of fuel, put the oil in and bounce up and down a few times on it, that will come down roughly to the right ride height and look cosmetically quite right. Robin Hoods do sit a little bit higher than other cars because we are using them for general use and not just for use on a track, which is perfect. So, but we have made a lot of allowances and provisions on both the front suspension and the rear suspension to adjust it, to get it to the height that you yourself would be happy with. So if we just move the camera across to the shock absorber top fixing just here, you can see that it is a multi-hole hold affair, and it is a kind of a double bracket. There's a bracket inside a bracket, and you can move this up and down to have the top of the shock absorber at a desired height, or you can totally disregard the inner bracket and put the shock absorber eye in one of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes. But obviously as you move up that bracket, it does mean you've got to trim away the bottom of the bracket. On top of all that, there is still the adjustment on the 2 large nuts on the threaded sleeve of the shock absorber. So without any doubt, there is ample adjustment on these shock absorbers. And even if you decided to put alternative shock absorbers on the back of this, then whatever you fitted, there is provision in this system to adjust. Remember, on the front we've got various holes in the bottom of the wishbone to move the shock absorber fixing, and then even on the top of the shock absorber fixing at the front there are still some more holes that you can move that in and out. So we're confident that whatever height or however you want to use your Robin Hood Super Spec, then you can adjust the suspension accordingly. We come now to these instruments that are quite neat and quite attractive, and obviously all the warning lights and all the information you need is in this one cluster, and in addition the gearing of the gearbox is compatible with this speedometer, so you'll get a correct reading. Obviously I know lots of you will want to alter the instruments and fit your own instruments, but it may be a good idea to use these that you're given with the kit to start with to make sure everything's working and to monitor the performance of the engine. The instructions on them do tell you not to stack them like that, so when you get them home make sure that you don't stack them upside down, you turn them around the correct way and store them like that. When you come to fit them, you can see there is 4 holes in the instruments in the plastic casing, 1, 2, 3, 4. All you have to do is to pop a drill through those holes, wobble the drill around a little bit, particularly backward and forward, so that the 4 fixings on the back of your dashboard, again this is the dashboard, they've got studs welded on the back, so those studs you can then thread your instruments onto those studs and bolt them up tight so that they fit flush with the back of the panel. We have changed it, I think. I do believe that you still use the studs in the normal matter there at the top, but on some of the models we've got a little clip that clips onto there to secure the bottom, but that's pretty straightforward. The actual area that isn't straightforward is the fact that we haven't, to be truthful, got the correct plugs that plug into the back of that instrument. So it is a little bit of a compromise, but providing you do it neatly, there isn't a problem. We have got a plug that's almost correct. That is the plastic plug. There is a flap that closes together when you've got the connections in, and we give you a metal strip of connections, a magazine, that's the word I'm looking for, a magazine of connections that you snap those off and you crimp the wires on, and then you put the terminal inside there. And basically what happens is that we do trim this down to fit into there, and Walter will show you precisely how it's done now. And he did say to me a couple of minutes ago that although these are a crimp connection, possibly a little blob of solder on them wouldn't do any harm. Now we have given you 4 rolls of wire, so it is a good idea to mix the colours up so they're easy to identify. But on the written instruction that we'll give you a clear drawing of that, and we'll number each of the connections 1, 2, 3, 4, and together there's what, probably a couple of dozen, so there's quite a few, so we'll number them all clockwise so it'll be quite clear. And they all do something, they all have a use under normal circumstances, but I'm sure that in this Super Spec car there'll be some that won't be used. But anyway, we will still put all the wires on and label and number up each wire. So I'll just hand you over to Walter now, and he'll explain how you actually fasten the wires onto these terminals. And it is suggested that when you know that you've got them all on and you've got them pushed home, then we do supplement them with a little bit of the high quality silicone sealer to hold that plug in so that plug doesn't come out. Over to you, Walter.
Okay. As Richard said, you get the plug, and all you do is you just cut the plug down, just so it lines up basically with the terminals. You don't want them touching or half and half. You've got to have them lined up. So if you cut the middle out of it, just there, and then I've already done it on this one. Cut them down. You know, just a little bit of trimming on both sides. Just make sure they line up. That's all there is to it. Just like spy down the holes, and you can see that they line up. Make sure they go in like that. As for the wires, if you crimp them, put a little bit of solder on them, it won't go amiss. You just take them out, and it's very simple. You just get the wire, make sure it's in the right place, and just clip the wire in, and you'll hear a definite click. And when that's in, you just make sure they're all in like that. And make sure they're lined up, and then put your silicone seal around.
Right, that sounds really easy, Walter. How long do you think the tails of the wires should be?
About a foot.
Okay, about
At least
a foot.
yeah.
Remember what we said, we was going to have all the tails of the wires, and then we'll have that multi-block connection that will join together the wires on that loom. Have you got that cluster that you did earlier with all the wires in? So there's one that we've done earlier, and you can see that we've got, unfortunately they're all the same colour wires, but at this end we'd be labelling those 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on, and that's ready to plug into that canter wires that had already been pre-stripped from your loom, and it fits in quite well. You see we've got a silicone sealer, and that's quite permanent, and that can be taken in and out at any time quite easily without any problem. They're all the illumination lights. They just come out of the wall, just change the bulbs in there. They're all the bulbs, quite easy to put in and out. And then your speedometer just clicks on the back like that.